Judge Michael White, during the court of Aaron's trial, allowed this young girl here, Molly Staunton, to be verbally and physically attacked during the course of her testimony from her kitchen in New York to the court in Dublin. Judge Michael White allowed testimony in a capital murder trial to be carried out by a video link from someone's kitchen in New York to the courtroom in Dublin. Judge Michael White allowed Daniel Cahill and Detective Mark Phillips to blatantly tell lies in relation to his arrest and the drugs that were found in Daniel Cahill's apartment on the morning of his arrest. And he allowed the farcical scenario that there were Homeland Security officers, NYPD, an immigration removal officer, a drugs unit, and he allowed the narrative to be portrayed in court that Daniel Cahill was detained. He wasn't arrested. So that is a very small snippet of what happened in Aaron's case, but we want to look into, as we have been in the previous few weeks, looking into James Flynn's passage through the Irish judicial system. Now, I have done a couple of brief videos on James's interactions with the court system, and we've sent some of those details to a number of media outlets and to some political parties. And as per usual, and it's not unexpected, we have had no reply as yet. So we've seen what happened with the judicial system in Aaron's case, and I just want to go through in a little bit more detail what has happened with James Flynn. Now, I have made, I think, errors in explaining what's happened in James's cases, and I don't think I was strong enough about the detail of how corrupt the system was as James moved through the system. So we're going to break it down very quickly, and we'll have a look at James Flynn's journey through the Irish court system. So here we have the first slide here, and the reason we are creating this video is, you can see the headline there on that slide is, the Supreme Court has elevated James Flynn's appeal, and this in itself exposes the illegal actions within the Irish state. And in examining the actions of Garda Síochána, the DPP, the judicial system, one thing becomes unmistakably clear: James Flynn's trial and conviction were unlawful from start to finish. And obviously, we have said that in relation to some of, a lot of, not all of what happened during Aaron's trial. And we continue. So we'll go back now and go back to December 2023, when Judge Tony Hunt, presiding over the Special Criminal Court, delivered his verdict following the trial of James Flynn and Brendan Traynor. James faced 2 charges on the extradition warrant. Count 1 was conspiracy to burgle from October 2012 to January 2013. And please remember, this is where the farce starts or continues. James Flynn was not even in the country until late November 2012. But despite this, he was charged with offences that occurred while he was running his business in the USA. And another vital part of this aspect of the case. So, and we'll go through it, and I'll come back to this again, but I just want to highlight it here. Obviously, this is a conspiracy, this gang that has been created, this 5, 6, 7, 8-man gang that never existed. At no time did the prosecution or Garda Síochána bring forward sufficient names to cover the amount of people who attacked the Credit Union car park and were involved in the brutal murder of Detective Garda Donoghue. But in those conspiracies to burgle with James Flynn, which we've covered in his extradition warrant, Brendan Traynor, his co-accused, wasn't charged with the theft of the Passat in Clogherhead. So they're charging James and putting down this gang is operating while James and his brother are in America. And then when they're home from America, some of the other gangs, alleged gang members, are taking a little break, and they're not involved in the other alleged crimes. This is how crazy this whole scenario is. Judge Hunt, when delivering his verdict, said that there was insufficient evidence to find either James or Brendan guilty of conspiracy. Under the law and the rules of procedures of the Special Criminal Court, that ruling should have resulted in a directed not guilty verdict, but that did not happen. And just as I have explained to you, because Brendan wasn't charged with this group of conspiracy and the robbery in the theft in Clogherhead, Brendan was totally exonerated. And they were in on the same charge. So this is how ridiculous it gets. And our caveat here is that Tony Hunt could not find James Flynn not guilty. He had to continue the facade. He had to continue the corruption. He had to continue and solidify the framing of our son, Aaron. Total acquittal of James at this point would have been serious egg on the face of the Irish judicial system on Garda Síochána. And the last lines here. That decision alone, not to direct himself acting as the jury to enter a not guilty verdict, represents a serious breach of James Flynn's fundamental rights and clear violation of Irish and international law. And for completeness and to confound how ridiculous this whole fiasco is, on count 2, Brendan and James were found not guilty of the robbery at Lordship Credit Union. So even in that first little bit, we have 8 or 9 slides, that's the first slide. So you have James' list of burglaries when James was in America, and then other burglaries, and Brendan Traynor wasn't charged at all for them. So this alleged gang, it simply does not exist. And that first slide really highlights how the whole thing was concocted and made up by Mark Phillips, Pat Marry, Brendan Graham and Lorcan Steen. Move on now to slide 2. Ultimately, Judge Hunt ruled that there was insufficient evidence Ultimately, Judge Hunt ruled that there was sufficient evidence in one of the alleged burglaries. Judge Hunt, without any notice to either legal teams, and in his capacity as the jury delivering a verdict, proceeded with creating a new conspiracy. This was the so-called conspiracy of a singular burglary on a singular night, which in itself is not a conspiracy, it is a substantive offence of burglary, and found James Flynn guilty as such. So there we have it, that's exactly what I've just explained to you. James was found guilty, Brendan not guilty. Brendan Traynor wasn't even mentioned on this singular burglary. So that's how crazy this whole gang and whole theory that all these burglaries was down to this gang on the border. Absolute nonsense. That verdict is not only contradictory, it's legally impossible. By definition, you cannot conspire on a single event. This completely collapses the state's case and exposes the fabrication at the heart of the prosecution's narrative. This entire proceeding was a manufactured illusion, a mirage created by the state to mislead the public into believing a network of creeper burglaries existed. In truth, there was only 3 stolen vehicles across all of these alleged incidents, a far cry from the orchestrated conspiracy painted in court. So, a couple of little details. James is in America for some of the burglaries. Brendan Traynor's not even charged with some of the burglaries, and there wasn't even vehicles stolen in some of these burglaries. So the whole thing is an illusion, a backdrop to the framing of our son, Aaron. Slide 3. So we've now examined how Judge Tony Hunt proceeded over James Flynn's trial in the Special Criminal Court and the serious legal errors Hunt made under the Irish Constitution and Criminal Procedure Act. His actions not only breached Irish law, but also contravened European and UK legal standards governing extradition and fair trial rights. So we've covered this on a number of occasions insofar as, and we had the extradition warrant, we have alerted the Irish authorities to this. that the terms of the extradition warrant were breached. And I hope the Irish authorities have contacted their counterparts in the UK, in London and in Manchester, where the extradition warrants unit is, and told them what Tony Hunt has done here. So not only has he breached Irish law and constitution, he has also breached European, UK and Irish extradition laws. And not a word in our mainstream media. Now let's have a look at how the appeal court judges, Edwards, Burns and McCarthy, and their decision in James Flynn's case. In points 19 to 21 of their judgment, these three judges acknowledge that Tony Hunt acted unlawfully. And by any reasonable standard of justice, that should mean very simply that James Flynn is fully acquitted and exonerated of all charges brought against him. Now, before we look at those points and what the word unlawful is, just the three appeal court judges, McCarthy, Burns and Edwards, they were scrutinising the decision made by Hunt. So you make that clear for everyone. So starting with Tony Hunt, and he's now been scrutinised by these three judges. These three judges have told us in legal documents that Tony Hunt acted unlawfully. And as before with Tony Hunt, when he said there was insufficient evidence, it should have been not guilty. When these three judges found that Tony Hunt acted unlawfully, the same applies. James Flynn should have been acquitted immediately. So the appeal court had only two lawful options as seen from Section 3 of the Criminal Procedure Act. So those three options were on hearing of an appeal against a conviction of an offence, the court may affirm the conviction and may do so notwithstanding that it is of opinion that a point raised in the appeal might be decided in favour of the appellant, if it considers that no miscarriage of justice has actually occurred, or quash the conviction and make no further order, or quash the conviction and order the applicant to be retried for the offence. So this is where it gets a little bit somewhat technical, but it's very, very simple. That was the options that these three judges has. But I'm just going to put this slide up again. You see where we've highlighted. On the hearing of an appeal against a conviction of an offence. And if we go down to point C, quash the conviction and order the applicant to be retried for that offence. But this is what actually happened. Sorry, I'm just going to bring up. This is the next slide, slide 5. The extract we've just seen, taken directly from Section 3 of the Criminal Procedures Act 1993, makes it absolutely clear that when hearing an appeal against a conviction, the court may only order a retrial for a specific offence for which the applicant was originally convicted. However, in this critical point, James Flynn has now been sent for retrial for an offence he was never convicted of. And I'm just going to bring up what the judges have told us. Apologies, I'll just take it up here. Here we go. And we see there point 19. Accordingly, there is no subsisting valid conviction on the only available charge. So James Flynn was not convicted on this charge. Namely, the original charge, this is the theft of the Passat in Clotterhead, as the amendment was unlawful. So there is no verdict in being, no verdict exists. So if there is no verdict, James Flynn legally cannot be sent back for a retrial on a charge that does not exist. So the charge doesn't exist and the conviction does not exist. And here we see it. All of the relevant sections, including point C, have been underlined and highlighted in bold to show you this blatant breach of the Criminal Act. So I'm just going to pop back up. There we go. The appeal against the conviction of an offence, but he can only be retried on the offence. There was no offence to retry James Flynn. I know it's somewhat confusing, but the three judges acted unlawfully. It is as simple as that. It breaches Section 3 of the 1992 CPA, the Criminal Procedures Act. And it's our opinion that Judge Tony Hunt knew exactly what he was doing when he illegally amended. And the three appeal judges tell us clearly that Tony Hunt acted unlawfully. Tony Hunt knew exactly what he was doing, premeditated. These three judges also knew what they were doing was wrong. They've told us in legal documents that they knew Tony Hunt was acting unlawfully, and they are acting unlawfully, premeditated also. Why? They kick the can down the road because they think we are going to go away, that this is going to dissolve into the ether. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is going to make us even stronger. And we need you, the Irish public, to understand, I'll not say fully, but to see clearly that what these people are doing to our families is beyond deplorable, it's beyond despicable. And all this reflects back to Adrian, the man whose face was blown off in Lordship Credit Union. And we know for a fact, there's the photographs. The man who shot Adrian Donaghy is over 6 feet tall. Aaron Brady's 5'7". So the whole thing is a farce. So bring up this slide here, point 6. But a retrial was only possible because Tony Hunt had not given a lawful ruling of not guilty at that point when giving his verdict, when he stated that there was insufficient evidence on count 1. Sending James back on that same charge would breach one of the most fundamental principles of law, double jeopardy. The rule that a person cannot be tried twice for the same offence. So this is how we know it was double jeopardy. Because Hunt knew if James was found not guilty of the creeper burglary in Clogher Head, there was no way he could have been retried for it because of double jeopardy. He can't be tried twice for the same thing. But his words, insufficient evidence for that crime, insufficient evidence, tells us that the next point he should make is that James Flynn is acquitted and not guilty. But it's all premeditated and it is there for everyone and all to see. So slide 7. So the Irish judicial system is now trapped itself, and it is trapped. And instead of upholding justice, they twisted the law to protect their own. They tried to hide behind an extremely dubious technicality that Tony Hunt never explicitly said the words not guilty, even though his findings made that the only possible conclusion. By doing this, both Tony Hunt and the Court of Appeal have acted unlawfully, breaching Section 3 of the 1990, I think that should be 1992, Act, violating extradition laws and trampling all over James Flynn's human and constitutional rights. And because of all the above, the Supreme Court has now agreed to hear James's case. And the decision that you see written below here is the decision that has come back from the Supreme Court to elevate James's case to the Supreme Court, and this is the reason for it. This court, i.e. the Supreme Court, is satisfied that an issue arises as to the interpretation of Section 3 of the 1993 Act in circumstances where the indictment of which the applicant was originally charged was amended by the Special Criminal Court, and his conviction on foot of the amended indictment was quashed. A question arises as to whether a retrial can be ordered in respect of an offence of which the accused was not convicted. So James Flynn cannot be retried. It says it there quite clearly, whether a retrial can be ordered in respect of an offence which the accused has not been convicted. Well, I can answer that for the Supreme Court, and I haven't been to law school. No is the answer. But there's another caveat to this, and we most certainly would like James to go through a retrial. Now, it would be very scary to sit through it again, but the vast swathes of information missed, hidden and tampered with in Aaron's trial and James's trial, we would not allow that to happen again. And now that James has had more time to study what was happening while he was incarcerated illegally, those illegalities would not be allowed to reoccur for a third time in an Irish court. So, although I'm not saying we would like a retrial, we would definitely, most certainly, not be afraid of a retrial for James Flynn. But this may be part of the premeditation, and we will have to keep an eye on how long the Supreme Court take to make this decision, obviously what that decision is. And to confuse things a little bit more for you, James is due for retrial in February next year. James was sent for retrial by Edwards, McCarthy and Burns, which we know now is illegal. I've shown you this evening is totally and completely illegal. And that retrial has been set for February. So what we don't want to happen is these people in the judges in the Supreme Court now, to kick the retrial, kick the can down the road and drag out a protracted, unrealistic amount of time for the Supreme Court decision to be returned. And unfortunately, they can frame it and show it as an acquittal on a technicality, unless our mainstream media take up the mantle, take up the cause of what has happened in the Irish courts. All the court reporters are fully aware of Irish law. All the mainstream media outlets are fully aware of the intricacies of Irish law and what is right and what is wrong. And this is completely and totally wrong. It stinks to high heaven. And the final slide, and as I've said, it's there in black and white. The highest court in the land acknowledging that serious legal questions exist surrounding James Flynn's conviction and ordering of a retrial for a charge he was never convicted of. And in fact, a charge which Judge Hunt has already ruled there was insufficient evidence. When all this is taken into account, the unlawful rulings, the contradictions, the fabricated evidence, the outcome can only mean one thing. James Flynn must be fully and totally acquitted. So that's a brief rundown of James's journey since the decision was in December 23, I think April or May 23, when James and Brendan's case started in the CCJ in Dublin. So that is where we are with the legal aspect as regards James. The reason we are covering this and James's aspect of it, because we're showing without any shadow of a doubt what Judge Michael White was at is exactly and mirrors what these people here have done. Judge Tony Hunt, Burns, Edwards and McCarthy. They have conspired to protect each other. They've conspired to protect one of the most brutal, disgusting miscarriages of justice that has ever happened on this island. And obviously there has been many. So we're going to send a copy of this, these 3 pages. These are the 3 pages that I've just put up on the PowerPoint there. Send that to all the mainstream media outlets, all our politicians, all our crime correspondents will get a copy of that. No doubt some of them are watching it. If any of them has any doubt of anything that's in those 3 pages, does anyone want to contradict it? I'll speak to them at any time. And I haven't been to the Bar Council, but I know from reading the laws, what's in those 3 pages is the truth. And what those 3 pages capture is how disgusting and rotten our judicial system is. So we're going to continue with the campaign. Thank you for everyone to contact the campaign. Please, if you see anything in here, send the questions in. It's good to interact, and your interactions are obviously very good for our algorithms. We're being very, very heavily censored. Some of our videos got through and they're hitting tens of thousands. Others are being blocked. So we do need your help. Please, please, please like, comment and share. And as soon as we get any word on James's Supreme Court appeal decision or even a date, I've checked the day. We had hoped that it would be actually in December, but there's nothing in the legal diary for James Flynn versus the DPP in December. But that can change at any given time. The Supreme Court obviously can come back with their decision. So thank you once again. Please, please, please like, comment and share. And we'll see you all in the next video. Thank you.